Welcome to the Power BI Introduction Session 2 for the afternoon group. So I'll be recording this session at any time. Do not hesitate to ask me questions. You may unmute yourself and ask the question. I'll try and make many pauses and ask you if you have any questions from time to time. And there's also a chat. So you may also post questions to the chat, and I'll try and look very often to see if we have a question in the chat. So today's session is session 2. So the goal for today is to really go through the basic cycle of building a report in Power BI. So you need data. So maybe you have outcome tracker extracts, or any other source of data coming from another database or an Excel file that you maintain. These could be data sources. So we import that in Power BI. We'll learn that it can be transformed in the Power BI before we build charts and tables. When we bring lots of different data sources, so we'll do that today, getting a few extracts from outcome tracker, and we need to attach those together with relationships and then model the data. So we'll learn all of those terminology, what it means. And finally, we can create visuals, so charts and tables. So that's today's plan. Out of today's course, you'll get another small take home. I wonder if some of you tried to do the take home one. So maybe you can post in the chat if you had any success with the take home number 1. And first of all, before we jumped into session 2, I want to remind you that I've sent data to you. Well, actually it was sent, I think, last Monday. So Katie had sent a zip file entitled course files. So you should have unzipped this file as of last week. And in it, you have the 3 sessions. So today we are session 2. And there's a handout. So maybe if you like to take notes, you printed it out and you're going to take notes as we go along, or you can refer yourself to that handout later on. And in it, there's folders, data, and take home. So data, those are all the files of data that we're going to use today. So I'll jump to the take home number 1. Okay, so that was take home number 1. So you were asked to build this chart here, where it's a column chart with a scale of blue, putting in light blue the months where we got the fewer number of calls, and in darker blue are my months where I've had the most calls. So that was the project, and you were asked to use a file that was provided in the session 1 folder. There was a take home folder, and in it you could find the a call contact report. So it's a fictitious report. It really looks like the reports you could get from outcome tracker, but maybe, as you remember, same thing as for in session 1, I created those reports. So this is not real data. We are shelter B during this training session. So this is all the data for shelter B. And there was a report of all the calls we got for our fiscal year of 2019 and 2020. So the data was ranging from April 1st, 2019 until March 31st, 2020. That was what was in the file called contact report. So I'll just take a peek look at the chat. Yes, Janine, you were able to complete the exercise. Thank you. So for those of you who may have struggled, if you want to post the difficulties you encountered, or you may also tag along to view the solution that I'll present. Yes, awesome, Carrie. So let's move on. So I'll read what was take home one, what were you asked to do, and I'll perform as I go. So it said to open a blank Power BI report. So you may simply launch your Power BI desktop application, and every time you launch it, it opens a blank brand new report. So every time you open it, there's a prompt to sign up in the yellow pop-up. You may simply hit the X and get rid of it. There you go. So open this blank report and use get data. So remember, upper left corner, this is where it all starts, get data. And now I'm going to bring a CSV file. So first thing, I need to pick the proper format. So I'm bringing a CSV. And then I get a file browser to find my data. So I'm currently replicating the session 1 take home. So I'll pick this file. So once you hit open, it's gonna think about it and show you a sample. So it's showing me a few rows and then my columns. So I can validate, yes, this is what I wanted to load. And I do load for the last time, because today you'll learn to do it in a more robust way, a little more complex, but better way. Yet for take home, that's the only thing you had learned. So we load. Once we load, maybe there seems like there's no change, but actually the data is there. It's in the background. Okay, where is it? If I want to take a look at it, if I go to upper left, I can switch on the left side to data view. And now I see my full extract, and I could scroll down. There's over 1,000 rows, and I can see this extract that I loaded. I always have some kind of a summarized view on the right side. So on the right side, I have the name of my file, which becomes the name of my table, and listed below in alphabetical order is all my column headings. So when I go back to report view, on the left side, I go back to report view. And now I still have here in a summarized way my data that has been imported. So it's the table, the file that was named call contact report with all my columns. So to build this chart, it then said, create a column chart to display numbers of calls per month. Select the relevant fields from the right-hand side to create the chart as displayed below. So if I take again a sneak peek at my chart, you could see maybe that the title was system name ID by month, okay? Because counting my system name ID is actually allowing me to count how many calls I got, because on each row in that report is a call. So simply counting on the first column will give me the proper chart. So let's do this. So I'm now on the right. I'm going to select the column chart. When I select the chart below, I have the opportunity to say which should go on the axis, legend, values, tooltip for that chart. So axis, I would like the months. So I will expand date, and Power BI generated for me some groupings. So I can drag and drop the months on the axis. And afterwards in values, I want to count the calls. So I'll use the system name ID column. And when I bring it to values, I can validate here on this drop down arrow that it's going to be counting how many values I have for each month, and I'm going to get this in the chart. So here's my chart. For anybody who just joined, I'm giving the solution for last week take home. So I can stretch the chart. So I grabbed it by the corner and I was able to stretch it. Cool. So I have my values per month. I am a small shelter, so I know that those values are relevant. I know that I'm getting between 80 and 100 calls a month. So it seems like valid data. Exercise was asking me, how about formatting your data color? So formatting the columns, I'd like April to be in light blue because it is the lowest value, and my highest value to be in darker blue. How can I do this? Well, formatting, we hopefully remember that for any formatting, in my visualizations menu, I go down and there's the paint roller icon. Okay, so by default, at first when a chart is selected, I see the fields that are in it, what's on the axis, month, and the values is counting on the system IDs. But then with the icon paintbrush, I can go do some formatting on every aspect of the chart, even the third one, data colors. So when I select data colors, there's actually two options. Okay, there's one called show all. What about if I do some exploration? Oh, it's listing me all the months, and I could manually set a color for all of those. That may be useful in some situations, though the whole purpose of Power BI is that you build the report once, and afterwards you want like your updates to be instantaneous. Okay, you want it to be like in a few seconds you get your report updated monthly. If you set colors manually about which value is the lowest and which one is the highest, you would then need to do that manually at every update. So you want to have less manual stuff. I'm gonna bring that back to show off. What I'll be using is the icon that was displayed in the instructions and try and add a conditional formatting rule. So I'm gonna hit that. And I'm getting a pop-up. Okay, so a pop-up window about setting up some default, some conditional formatting. How to do so? Well, you were invited in your handout to take a sneak peek at the online documentation. Okay, so I'm gonna open up that web page. Power BI Microsoft has amazing online documentation, especially for the Power BI software. Like in the future, I won't be there. You'll have a few videos of a few tips that I give you, but you'll have issues and you may find help online. It is amazing, all the resources out there. So color by scale, maybe a few of you there to take a look. There's images, very like summarized yet complete information. So it's asking you to select color by scale. So in the format by, you want to start by color scale. So this is here illustrated on the image. And then you'll need to specify in the based on which field. So based on, for us, we want the color to vary according to the number of calls we had. And then you should define the summarization. So our numbers of calls we are counting. So our setting is going to be different than what's set up here in that image, but the instructions, you may relate to it and apply it to your specific scenario. And it's even saying if you select the diverging checkbox, this one here, then you can have a center color. So you can have 3 colors. So now that we've read about it, what's going to happen is we select color scale. Here we want to select based on what field. It's not based out of month. It's based out of my system ID that I want to count. And my lowest value, I want it light blue, and highest darker blue. If I check mark diverging, ugh, so I'll get quite a ugly chart, a Christmas looking chart. So let's keep it at only 2 colors. So doing okay. Et voila. I had managed to complete the take home 1 for last week. So that was a little wrap up in the solution. If anybody had any questions about that, now would be a good time. As I mentioned at the beginning, the extract that we used to build this chart was for a fiscal year. So if I show you the data was starting in April 2019, and it goes all the way down to March 2020. Though this chart is listing my months from January to December in a calendar chronological way. So probably it would make more sense that my chart starts at April 2019 and it should end at March 2020, because those first 3 columns are actually 2020 months. So fortunately, we're going to learn how to resolve that issue today. What will we do today? This is today's project. So today we plan on working with bringing many data sources to our report. You can see on the right-hand side. So you don't have that, okay? This is, you'll have this in 2 hours. That's the whole project for today. I'll take a look at the chat. Oh, so Katie needs to leave. And at the end, we'll be sharing the videos with all of you guys. So today's project, what is it? You can see maybe on the right-hand side that I brought many different data sources to my report. So I'll be doing that and learning what does that imply. I can close this. So today we will do a full cycle. Okay, we will learn all the steps and we will do them a few times so you can understand the pattern. Before we can build charts and tables, so those are my visualizations, there's lots of steps that need to be taken. And actually the Get Data button is here at the beginning of this whole cycle. So the Get Data button and then jumping to visualizations, we did that in the take home and it can work, but the proper process is to validate and maybe transform the data imported with Power Query. You need to take a look at relationships, modeling, and then you start working and doing charts. So we're gonna understand this by the end of the session, hopefully. Let's start new. So if you've been watching only until now, please join and open up with your Power BI desktop with me, and we'll try and build a report together. So I'm gonna launch my Power BI. So if you haven't done yet with me, you may start the Power BI desktop. When you get the prompt, we're simply gonna set it down. And here we are in a blank file. I always like to save my file right away from the beginning, and I'll do save from time to time. I've never had a Power BI report crash on me, but technology has its own way, and we're never too secure. So upper left is save, and you may simply save it somewhere on your computer, and I'm gonna call this session 2. You guys are my afternoon group. Okay. So what you had learned until now is always valid. Get data. It's my first step. And now today, the first thing that we're gonna bring in is an Excel file. Okay, so I've prepared an Excel file for you, a calendar file. So let's select this. In your file browsing, you're gonna find my course files in session 2, data. Here's the calendar. So under session 2 data, you can find a calendar Excel file. So you should get a pop-up with a preview. So no preview. Well, in the middle of the box, it's saying no items selected for preview. So how about if I click on sheet 1? So I've just clicked on sheet 1. And now, because an Excel file may contain many pages, many tabs at the bottom. So that Excel file only had 1 sheet, and it's some information about dates that I've prepared for you. So let's bring the file, and then I'll, or just pause a second, stay there, and I'll show you in Excel what is that file that I've prepared for you. Okay. So working with Power BI, you're gonna learn today and session 3 that you should always have a full list of date. Okay, when you use your extracts from any database, it may happen that some days you didn't get any calls. So some calendar dates won't be listed in your data file. But for some reasons that eventually we might encounter and understand, you want to have a full calendar. So this file that I've prepared for you, you may use it for loads of reports, and you have it for a little while because in it I've included dates from 2012 going all the way down to March 2029. So you're actually good like for 9 years using that file to do any reporting with any fiscal periods to be displayed in tables or charts. And what does that file do is I've calculated the fiscal months numbers. So April should be your first month, and because April is in Q1, and then I was able also to create fiscal years that go from April to March. So those nice information are going to be useful to do your Power BI reports. So maybe later on you want to use that same file for other reporting purposes. So that being said, we were in here and we wanted to bring that nice calendar because I'm the instructor and I'm telling you that you're going to need that. So currently, maybe some of you are like me and the load or transform button at the bottom are grayed out. They cannot be selected. This is because you need to check mark beside your sheet, and now you can move on. So from now on, you'll learn that you always want to click on transform data. Okay, if you were too quick and clicked on load, I'm going to help you in a second. But for those of you who are waiting, the proper way to go about it is to click transform data. So when I did click transform data, I'm taken to a new screen. Okay. So those of you, so this screen, if you're not seeing it, you may go to your Power BI desktop icon at the bottom, and you should have a few windows that you may pick from, and you should be able to select this one. And for those of you who maybe made the mistake and clicked on load, I'll join you. So if you were too quick and you clicked on load, you were taken back to the only Power BI that we knew of. So if you want to join us in transforming data, in the upper menu, in the middle, you have transform data. So please click on that. And again, you can join us in a new window. So what's this? We are now in Power Query Editor. So this is like a parallel environment inside your report. This is the engine where actually Power BI is writing scripts to automate the report update process. So now for us, it's gonna write queries, meaning the instructions of, hey, my calendar is saved over there in that folder, and I want you to bring it to my report. I have database extracts that I save here. Go and grab it to bring in the report. That's the basic steps of what's being done in Power Query. But furthermore, out here, I can transform the data. What does that mean? This is an Excel file that has lots of columns in it. And maybe in my report, I don't need all of those. I mean, this is just 7 columns. It's not big of a deal, but very often we can work with files of data that have like dozens of columns, and we don't need all those columns. So by selecting only a few, Power BI is simply going to import a few columns rather than the whole package. And that's going to help us having smaller file size. And then our reports are going to work better. That's one of the reasons. So enough talking. Let's try and do some transformation. Okay, so I want us to keep only a few columns, and we're going to select the columns that we want to keep. So yes, I want to keep my lists of all the dates. And now I want to keep only the columns that have fiscal information. So on my keyboard, bottom left, I have the control key. So I need to hold down the control key. And now I can select fiscal month number, month, quarter, and the last column of year, which has my fiscal years listed. So those are the 5 columns that I want to keep from that report. The other 2 columns in the Excel file, they were useful to calculate all my fiscal information. But doing my report, I won't need those. So now that I've selected what I want to keep, in the upper bar, I have all sorts of buttons that can help me out. In the middle, there's something about removing columns. So I don't want to remove the columns. I want to keep them. So if I click on the drop-down arrow beside remove columns, I have the option to remove others. So this is a good practice that I'm teaching you to rather always select what you want to keep rather than select what you want to remove for all sorts of reasons. Here I wanted to keep 5 out of 7, but often I want to keep 5 out of 30. So one of the reasons is it goes faster to select the ones that I want to keep. And there's other technical reasons when you get more advanced. So there we go. So I have now more limited information, and I like it. So one last thing, this is listed on your handout 1C. How about removing empty rows? if I have a row that doesn't contain anything, it won't be useful, but also sometimes it may display weird things. So it may display the empty month if there's a row that would have no month listed, and I don't want that. So when I bring an Excel file, a good practice would also always be to make sure you don't have any empty rows. So how do I do this? Well, I can filter out if there's any empty rows. I can select a column where the information is mandatory. So for instance, the date column, like the whole purpose of this list is to be a date list. There should always be a list. And here with the drop-down, I'll try to filter out to remove if there's any blanks. So when I open this drop-down selection, I see loads of dates, but at the bottom it's telling me, oh, here you're limited to 1,000 values. So we cannot display everything, and we cannot see if there was any blanks. So I'll do cancel, and I'll go on another column. So my fiscal months, there should be only 12 values for that. So fiscal months, I'm gonna click on the drop-down arrow of the column, and now I see all values going up to 12, and it's saying, oh, list may be incomplete, load more. So Power BI is gonna go through, because this has a few thousand rows. I mean, it's 20 years of dates. And now I get that somewhere in there, probably at the bottom, it loaded a few empty rows. So here I'm gonna remove the check mark for null, and I'll do OK. So this is listed on your handout at 1C. A good practice when you bring Excel files is to make sure you don't have any empty rows. So going on a column where you should always have a mandatory value and removing the null is gonna remove any empty rows. So that should be enough for that file. So what do I do then? To get out of Power Query Editor, I upper left click on the Close and Apply. And voila. So what's happening, if I go take a look on the left side in my data view, ta-da! So my calendar information has been uploaded to my report, and the original Excel file has 7 columns. And the original Excel file is saved on my computer, and it still has 7 columns. But when I connect to it to bring it in Power BI, I only bring the 5 columns that are useful to me. And I'll go back to report view. And in report view, the only difference is on the right side. My table is listed with my 5 columns. So date, fiscal month, quarter, and year are listed. So one thing not too interesting, my calendar is named sheet 1. So when I bring an Excel file, the default name for my query or table is going to be the name of the sheet. No worries. Earlier, I showed you the button to go back in Power Query. So in the middle, there's the button Transform Data. So I can always go back. If I've made some transformations and I realize I made a mistake, I can always go back. So Transform Data. And now it's going to open back this Power Query editor that we're discovering today. And I can see on the left side, my query is named Sheet 1. I'll simply double click and call this calendar. So I've hit enter and it's been saved. So close and apply. And the name has been changed if I look on the right-hand side to calendar. So let's do this again. Okay. So very basic step. I need first to import my data and take a look at it in Power Query. So let's do it again. Get data. Now I have prepared for you outcome tracker extract for shelter B. And those extracts that we get are in CSV format. So first thing, you always need to pick the proper file type. So I'm going to select Get Data CSV. And now if I go to course file session to data, I can select the first one. So I created a call contact report for a whole fiscal year. So these are all the types of calls we got for a whole year. When you hit open, you get a sample display. A CSV file always only have one page. Therefore, you get a display right away. So this looks like my call contact report. So I'm ready to hit, careful, transform data. Okay, so I click transform data and it's gonna open another window, the Power Query editor. What's this screen? Okay, so we've just came here previously and when we brought in the calendar, and we can see on the left-hand side, calendar is listed. I see queries too. Okay, so I'm about to have two files of data imported in my report, which becomes what I call tables of data. And to get them, I do queries. So that's all synonymous. So I have them listed here. I have my buttons at the top to do transformations. And what do I have on the right-hand side? I have a panel and it's called with a list of applied steps. So actually, when I simply connect to a file and I want to import it, in the back scene, Power BI is designing a script containing a few steps of transformation. And here, when I bring a CSV file, it generates for me already 3 steps. Okay. What are those? Well, I can click on it and I can see what was done and what was generated automatically. So on the right-hand side, I'm going to click on source and I'm going to see if there's anything different in the central display. So I'll zoom in on column 1. So what's different here is actually when I simply connect to my source of data, when I bring the CSV file, my column headings are on row 1. Okay. And for my Power BI to work, row 1 should be the first row of data, not being my column titles. So the first step was bring the file. If I look now to the right, then Power BI generated for me a step of promote headers. So if I click on this on the right, now I see in the middle that the first row is data, and now each column has a title. Okay, so that's good. It's good that Power BI did that automatically for me. Then also, what's in each column? What type of data do we have in each column? That's also going to be important for my report to work properly. And currently what we have is ABC. ABC means that Power BI is kind of saying in this columns we have text. And in each column, it seems like it's text, but it is not. Like my date column This is not text. These are dates and length of a call. These are minutes that I will need to do a sum or an average. So it's not some type of data, text data. But nonetheless, after simply promoting the headers, Power BI was now better able to reestablish what's the data type of each column. So if I click now on the right-hand side on the third step, I can see that what did Power BI do? It says, well, your system name ID, this looks like numbers. And then, oh, this date column, this looked like time relative information. And your minutes and calls and minutes, that seemed like it's all numbers. So those data types were all properly transformed for me. So when I import a file, I should always click transform data to come in here and validate that those basic transformations have been done properly. Furthermore, when I'm in here, I can do lots of interesting stuff, like keeping only the columns that I want. So let's do this right away. I'm gonna select date. So the first column that I wanna keep is date. And now I'm gonna start holding down the control key on my keyboard. And I'm gonna select a few other columns, like length of calls. And I need to scroll to the right. And I'm gonna keep type of requests. Oh, sorry, I got confused. I'm gonna start over. So I'm gonna start with the system name ID. And I hold down my control key and I want date, length of call, and my type of request. So you should have held the control key down and select all 4 columns, and you can scroll down the bar at the bottom to validate. Once you have the proper columns highlighted, just like we did with calendar, I can find my remove column button and make sure to click on the downward facing arrow to select remove other columns. Voila. What do I want to do more? I can change my column headings. Okay, system name ID. That doesn't look too good in a report. So I'm going to double click on that and I'm going to call it calls. So each row is one call. So I'm simply going to count the calls, the rows, and I'm going to be able to know how many calls I got per period of time. And then again, this column title, I don't like it too much. This is way too long to display in a chart. So I'm going to double click for length of call, and I'll call this call length. Voila. And what if I take a look on the left-hand side? So my whole file was named call contact report for the whole year. How about I shorten that name to call contacts? So again, I can refer to this, and it is going to be software on the eye. There's so much to look at everywhere in that software. Having a relevant short names might be interesting. So I'm done. I'm going to do, so what I did here, I talked a lot, but eventually the actions were select the columns you want to keep. We did remove others, and we did some column renaming, and on the left side, query renaming. So I'm able to do close and apply. And the result is on the right-hand side, call contacts has now appeared in my fields list. So right-hand side that we had calendar. And now if I expand call contacts, I see my 4 columns title here. So hopefully you're experimenting with me and it's going well. I'm gonna let you try at your own pace. Same thing, to upload another file. Okay, so on your handout, you have at point 1F, you have the instructions to upload another CSV file. So you have this file, the call contact report, but for turnaways only, residential turnaways. So I want you to bring this file in Power BI. So you may ask me questions, and I'm trying to pause my recording. So you had close to 2 minutes to try and upload another file. So I'm gonna do the process, get data. I want a CSV file. I want the call contact report residential turnaway provided in session 2 data folder. I get a sample displayed. I like it. So I click transform data. Instruction listed, remove columns. Try and keep the same 4. So I have system ID. I hold down control key. So I may select date, length of call. And if I move to the right, I'll find type of requests. So I want to keep those. So using my remove button, remove column button, I'll be able to select remove others. So I'm left with 4 columns. I will do some renaming. So first one, I'll rename turnaway calls. I could have named it again just calls, like we did in the previous one. But when I'll refer to it, and when I'm in report view, it's easier if it has a more meaningful name. And then for my length of call, again, I'm gonna double click so I can do turn away call length. Yes, so somebody asked, what if I didn't bring enough columns? So yes, I brought that, and then I started to do my report, and then I realized I'd like some more information that I had not brought in. A nice thing is here, what we looked at just earlier, the applied steps. So when I go back up, so maybe I'm 2 days later and okay, wait a second. So I get out of here. So 2 days later, I realize, oh, maybe I didn't bring in enough columns. Okay, so I can always open up my Power Query with the transform data button. And now when I come back, it's always going to be positioned on the first file. Okay, so I'm on so on the left side, I'm on calendar, but I realize my issue is with my call contact report for turnaways. So I select it on the left side, and then I can edit the transformations. The transformations that I did are all listed on the right-hand side. Remember, the source file saved somewhere on my computer is not affected. What I'm currently doing is stating from this source file, I only want to bring 4 columns. But if I made a mistake and I want a 5th one, well, using the applied step on the side, I can go back up. And how can I show you this easily? Actually, the easiest way would be to delete the steps you did. So here on the side with the X, I can delete the steps I did. And now restart from removing my rows. So I select all the columns that I want to keep. If ever it's 5, I keep 5. But now I'll reselect the 4. And I simply redo my transformations. Okay, and if I had selected 5, then I would have 5. That's great. One last thing, I don't want this huge name on the side. Okay, I don't want to keep this huge name for my query. So I simply double clicked and I can rename this as being residential turnaways. Okay, so once I'm done, I think this is all good. In the upper left, I can click close and apply. Let's take a look on the right-hand side. Below fields, I now have calendar. I can collapse it, call contacts, and residential turnaways is my new one. So I've just expanded the last one. Just to feel more at ease, if you'd like to see the full names of everything listed out here in fields, just make sure you put your mouse directly on the line defining the fields column, and you can stretch it. Okay, so bring the mouse cursor, and when your mouse cursor becomes arrows pointing right and left, you can stretch out the left pane. Sorry, right pane to see it, to see all the words. Cool. So, woof, all that talking was only Power Query and only a glimpse at Power Query. We're going to use it again today, so you get used to that new environment. I said something about relationship and modeling before I try and do charts. Okay, why is that important? So just watch a second. I'll do a chart and it's going to be ugly. So my chart, calendar, I'll put my months on the axis and I'll try and count my calls. Okay, so you just learned how to do those charts with an axis and a value. If I try to do this, ugh, what's happening? Okay, I get an ugly chart. Well, it's not ugly, it's just meaningless. Woo! I am a tiny shelter. I am not getting 1.4 billion calls per month. That's absolutely a wrong value. Hopefully, none of you guys are getting 1.4 billion calls a month. And furthermore, I'm getting exactly the same number each month, which is purely impossible. So that's wrong. That's why we need the two other steps. I just wanted to show you a glimpse and show you also that if you get the exact same value on each column, or if this was a list, a table, that's a hint. You probably forgot to do the relationships. Okay, so what's that, relationships? So here on the left-hand side, we have model view. So let's go there. And here we are seeing our 3 files or tables of data that we imported, my calendar, and 2 extracts from outcome tracker. So these must be tied with each other with relationships. Okay, that's like a fundamental concept of Power BI, of a new way of thinking that takes you to a complete different mindset from Excel. Unless you're much, much smarter than me, you won't grasp the whole concept of it in 2 hours. Okay, it takes time, and maybe eventually you'll feel, oh, I understand what I'm doing. But at first, I've experimented that phase. You just got to trust the instructor that that's the way to go. Okay, so what will I do now is I want to attach those together. So you can relate here that calendar, that's the name I gave to my table. And what I see listed, the 5 words, those are my columns heading. So I must attach tables that have matching columns. So in our current scenario, it's going to be the date. So in calendar, I have a date field. In that column, it is only dates. And then in call contacts, I have lots of information, but I have dates also. So what I have here in dates are matching values to dates in my calendar. Okay, because this is a 1 fiscal year and my calendar had the dates for 20 years. So there's corresponding values. So what you need to do is you pick one date with your mouse and you drag and drop on the other date word. And now my 2 tables are attached together by dates. If I bring my mouse over this new arrow in between the 2 tables, dates get highlighted in both tables. There's a 1 at the beginning of the arrow. So that's a good thing. So attaching my tables together, I should always have 1 going to a star. What does that mean? Is that in my calendar lists, every day is listed only once. Rather than in my call contact file, on a given day, I may have many calls. So there are many rows with the same date. So a given day is repeated many times. This is why we have a star. So as of now, we don't understand too much where this is going. The whole purpose is when I do a chart, I'll put information from the calendar on the axis, and then I'll use this other report to count how many calls or to get an average of my call length. So on the table called contacts, I'll be making calculations. And on the table that's at the other side of the relationship, I'll be able to put this on the axis. We're not too sure to understand why, but we'll just go along with it, okay? All right, turnaways table, same thing. I'll wanna count calls or get the average call length for turnaways. So I need to attach it to something, I'm going to attach it again to the calendar. So date, I grasp it and I drop it to attach calendar and turnaways. So grabbing one date field in either of the table and drag and drop to the other one. So they'll be attached, one going to a star, because on a given day, I can have many turnaway calls. So relationship, that's a tough concept. You'll need it. The key thing is if I bring many data source, they need to be attached together. And the call contacts, I'll be counting those. My turnaways, I'll be counting those. You do not attach tables that you are both counting together. They need to be attached to a third table. So that's why having my calendar, I'll be able to take a look per month, for each month, how many call contacts did I get and how many turnaways did I get? And I'll be able to put both information in one chart. Okay, enough talking. I can take a look at the chat. No question as of now. So for now, just accept it, that this needs to be done, and eventually playing with it and building reports, and we'll talk again about it Friday, it may at some point make sense of why. Modeling. I'll take a look at each of my columns that I brought in and wonder if I need to do some modeling for each of those columns. So to take a look at that, next step, modeling, I'll go in data view. So on the left-hand side, I went to modeling. And now, first table being listed is my calendar. So what do I want to do here? I want to hide a few things that I maybe won't need from now on. So I have less stuff that I see, and do some modeling. So I zoomed to the upper left section. I'm going to select my columns one by one. So currently calendar is being displayed, and I'll select date. So what do I see with date? See, it's telling me when I select date, I see now new information at the top telling me that that is a date. That's fine. And what's going to interest us is here the summarization. So I won't be counting or doing the sum of my dates. I don't want to summarize that. Those time information are going to be useful for axis, for categories, but not for counting them. And actually this column date, I won't do a chart where every day is listed. I'll do a chart with my last 3 columns, month, quarter, year. But the first 2, I don't really need those. So I'm gonna right click on date and do, so I'll go down and I find hide in report view. So right click on date and hide in report view. So I needed my date column to do my relationships. With that column, I attached tables together. But afterwards, I don't need to see it all the time. My fiscal month numbers, I won't need to see that all the time. So that one again, I can hide. So why did I bring this column if the first thing I do with it is hide it? Well, actually my month column, let's click on that. So my column is named month, but actually to Power BI, if I look up here, this is text. So this is only words. So the only way Power BI will know how to sort those words here is in alphabetical order. Okay. In take home one, we had a month value, but it was one that had been created by Power BI. So Power BI knew that those were months and that they should be sorted January to December. When I work with a fiscal year, I need to bring my own column with months. And that column, I need to tell Power BI what is the fiscal year order. And that's why I had a column with fiscal months. So a key feature, this is number 2D on your handout. You want to change the sorting order. So my month here, at the top in the middle, I have a button, sort by column. When I click on it, I can see that currently my month column is sorted by itself. So I'm going to change that and select fiscal month. So nothing changes in this screen, but I'll click again on sort by, and I can see that month column is in yellow. It is selected, but it currently says that it should be sorted according to fiscal month number. So what's going to happen? I'm going to go, you can hang out in here because you don't have an ugly chart like me, but I'm going to go in report view and let's take a look at my chart here. So my chart here, I can try and change the sorting order. Ooh, and it evolved. Right away, we don't have a continuous value for all columns. So that I had told you, when you get the same value everywhere, this is an issue with your relationships. So we're probably on the right track because we did relationships and now we don't have the same single value. And now that I've changed my months, maybe I can sort that chart properly. I'm going to ask for that chart to be sorted ascending and sorted ascending by months. I'm going to redo those things with you later on, but just to show you right away, what am I doing currently doing this modeling? The purpose is that eventually I'm able to build charts that are going to go from April to March. So maybe you were waiting for me out here. Okay, so we have hidden columns and changed the sort order for months. Now let's go on the right-hand side to our next table, call contacts. So same thing for call contacts. I need to go through all my columns. So I selected call contacts on the right-hand side. And now I'll zoom and I'll select my columns one at a time. Calls. So this is a column and each row is a call and it has a number, okay, system name ID. So what do I see when calls is selected? At the top, it's telling me this looks like whole numbers, and summarization sum. So Power BI, anytime I'm going to ask to use the calls column in a visual, it's going to attempt to do the sum of my system name IDs. So that's wrong. What I want to do with that column, I simply want to count how many rows I got in April. And that's going to give me how many calls in April. And if I count in May, I'm going to get how many calls in May. So this column here, I should set it that my default summarization is count. So that's part of modeling. So modeling, I go through each column and I validate here what's my default summarization. Modeling is also about hiding columns that I don't need. So I'm going to hide here my date. So right click on date. I need a date to do my relationship, but from now on, I don't need to see it anymore. So it's been grayed out. Call length. So call length, that's a whole number. And the default is going to be doing the sum. So this could be valid. Okay, in my report, if my intent was to know how many minutes did my employees spend on the phone per month. So I'm simply going to do the sum of my minutes and I'm going to get that value. So that could be valid. But me in my report, I'll be interested to know what's my average call length. When I'm getting a call for information requests or admission, residential admission, maybe I'm going to get a different length of call, crisis support. So what would be the average? Since I know that's what I'll be interested in my report, I can change here that the default is going to be average. And I could have, and I'm going to show you later that you could either later on switch it to sum or average, but I'm always going to be selecting the main one that I'll be applying to a column. Type of requests, nothing to do here. It's going to be interesting to look at some requests and compare them with each other. So nothing to do here. One last table, hang in there. On the right side, I am now able to select my residential turnaways. Selected that on the right side. And again, same thing. I go through my columns. So I'll go a little faster. The turnaway calls, I want count of those. So simply changing the summarization to count. Date, I don't want to see that anymore. So simply right click to hide in report view. Turnaway calls, the length of my calls. Some could be valid, but me today, I rather have average. And type of request. So I uploaded that, but then I realized if I click on the drop down arrow that I made that selection when I got my call contact extract. I specified that I only wanted my residential turnaways. So that's actually meaningless. So I could go back to Power Query and get rid of it, but I feel lazy, so I'm simply going to hide it. Okay. You have to be very picky and bring the minimum columns required when you are working with data files of millions of rows. But if you're working with files that are below 1 million rows, I mean, you can be a little more generous on the number of columns that you bring in, okay? That being said, don't bring a table of 50 columns. You very rarely need all that information. Just because they're managers, once you've given them 50 calculations, maybe they're not keeping track anymore. Just best practices on dashboards. You shouldn't have 50 different measures. So no need for 50 columns. Okay, so this was modeling. I went through Power Query, I did relationships and modeling. I chose count, average, hiding, and changing my month table. I sorted the months per month fiscal number. So that's what I did. I'm ready to build a report. So I'm going to delete my ugly chart, which was now quite pretty, and we're going to build it together. So hopefully I still have many of you on board. Let's do charts. So that's number 3 on our handout. So I click somewhere in the white of my canvas so that I know that nothing is selected. And I'm ready to start a new visual from scratch. So going to the right-hand side, under visualizations, I'm gonna pick the second one, my basic column chart. And I'm gonna, how about I drag and drop? So on the right-hand side, below calendar, I'm gonna put month on the axis. Then I go down, and for my values, I'll bring my calls from call contacts. And you can see here, we have a lightened view on the right-hand side. In the take-home one, you brought in the full call contact report, and you had loads of columns. So you had lots of unnecessary stuff listed here, but now there's less stuff for me to look at. So what's happening to my chart? I can take a look. Looks good. If I put my my mouse cursor in a corner, I can stretch it to view the full thing. So if this was your real data, you would be happy because you would know that your call center receives about less than 100 calls a month, probably 80 to 100. So those values seem accurate. So currently, this chart, we used 2 tables to build it. So let's add the turnaways in here. So I'm gonna go back to the right-hand side. And in my values field, I only had calls. So I'm gonna drag and drop to add my turnaway calls. So you can see here when you drag something to the fields value, there's a yellow, in the background, there's a yellow line that appears. So it helps you choose, do I want turnaway calls to be listed first or second? Okay, so you wanna try and move them around to put them in the same order. I currently have calls listed first, followed by turnaway calls. So now those 2 should be in my chart. Oh, and they are one above the other. So that could be an interesting visual, but I wanted them to be side by side. No worries. Even though I started building a chart, I can change my chart style at any point in time. So I'll go to the right. And instead, so currently I can see that the second icon is highlighted. It's grayed out. So I'm gonna pick the 4th one. So the 4th one is clustered columns. And now my 2 values are gonna be side by side. Okay, and I'm mainly doing chart in this training session, but just so you know, you can also display the information in a table format. So for instance, here, I'm gonna click on matrix just to show you. And if I only wanna see the numbers, so here are simply the numbers, but just for the purpose of this training, I'm mainly showing you how you can display it in a chart. Because remember now, using Power BI, like benefits from it, is really trying to look at your data on the computer, not printing it. And when you look at a chart, so I'll bring it back to chart. When I look at a chart, in a glimpse, I can see that April was way lower than the other months. Okay. And when I simply bring my mouse over it, there I see the exact value. But most of the time looking at values, it's to compare them, or you're tracking an objective. So that's interesting, though I'm combining 2 information that aren't really the same. My turnaways are only for residential admission requests. but my call contacts, it was all types of calls that I'm getting. So actually, what I'm trying to build is a chart about only my residential admission requests and comparing my calls versus turnaway calls. So that being selected and being said, I have my chart selected and I need to add a filter to only keep residential admission requests. So this is going to happen on the right-hand side. So what do I do here? I'm going to use now for the first time my filters panel. So in filters panel, I go down and I can read filters on this visual. Okay. There's possibilities to filter on what's already loaded or add a field. So if I add my type of requests for call contacts, I'll be able to filter on it. So let me do this. So on the right-hand side, I'm going to grab, this one really needs to be drag and drop. So I'm going to drag type of requests and drop it for filters. When I drop it, it shows me all possible values. And with a simple check mark, I can filter to keep only residential admissions. And now my columns dropped. When you look at the report, it's not, I just clicked in the white of my page. So when you later on, well, you'll simply open this report, it's not saying anywhere that this is only residential admission requests. So I should definitely edit my title to make it a significant title. Okay, so make sure your chart is selected. So when your chart is selected, you have a gray line around it. And then any formatting, including the title, this is all happening in Visualizations menu. If you go down, at some point you find the paintbrush. Okay. So by default, when a chart is selected, the first thing you always see is the different fields that are going to be used to do that chart. What do I put on the axis? What in the value? And then just beside the paintbrush, this is where I can format everything, like the axis, data colors, and title. So I'll click on title, then I get some options, and I can type residential admission requests, calls, and turnaways. And I've deleted the extra. So, great. I won't explore all the formatting possibilities. The basic is just going through the menus and finding out possibilities. One that you probably, like me, definitely want to know is getting rid here of the month word. I mean, if I put months on an axis, I'm quite sure I don't need an explanation that these are months. So I'll do some formatting on my X axis. So in visualizations, as I go down, I have X axis. I expand the formatting menu. And now it's simply about scrolling. And at some point you find title on or off. And I've put it off. So at this point, I'll do a save. So this was a full cycle. How about you try and do a chart on your own? Okay. Once again, I'll give you 2 minutes for you to try and do a chart. This one. Okay. So It's going to be the same thing. It's just that this time it's a line chart. So you have the instructions on your handout number 3E. At your own pace, you may try and do these charts. I'll do a small timer of 2 minutes. And so pick a line chart. And this time it's using the fields of call length. I'll pause my video. So how do we do this chart? So click in the weight, then I'm gonna select line chart. So it was this icon on the second row of icons. Your icons may be listed in a different way than mine. It depends on your screen size. So I pick my chart. Then I wanted to see months, quarter, and then call length and turn away call length. So you may, to build your chart, simply select them, and Power BI is going to attempt to put them in the right spot. So actually, I don't want quarter to be in my legend. So I'm going to grab it and move it to my axis. So I forgot to tell you about the double axis concept before launching you on this exercise, but let's discover it together. So I can have multiple axes. So let's put month and quarter. And then I want to compare both values, either my regular call length or the call length for turnaways. So now that I've set all my fields in either axis or values, I can take a look at the chart and it seems good. Then the instructions said I should add a filter for my type of requests to be only residentials. Because there again, I must remember that my call contacts, this is all possible calls. But my turnaways, this is only residential admissions. So to compare similar things, I'm going to apply a filter to keep only residential admissions requests. So that's happening in the filter panel. So in filter panel, I want to filter on my visual. And there's the box here, add fields here. So I need to grab types of requests on the right-hand side. So I grab types of requests and I drop it in filters. Doing so, now my types of requests choices are listed and I can simply check mark the last one, residential admission requests. So now I have the right values, very similar. What about my quarters? So this chart, and that's something we had explored in session 1 when we looked at the annual stats dashboards. We had some dashboards that could actually be transformed in another one, displaying the information either by years or by shelter types. Here, I see now that I have arrows in the upper right corner of my chart. So clicking on the double arrows takes me to quarter view. And then I can use the arrow to drill up. Okay, and I'm back to the original format. So interesting fact. So now my chart has little arrows in the corner. We didn't do that for the other one. So if I go up and I select the other one, see there's no arrows in the upper right corner, meaning that there's no other axis possible. So hopefully you succeeded in doing these exercises. Just one final step. I'm going to select the chart and edit my title to make sure that everybody knows that this is only for residential admissions. So my chart is selected. I go to the right, paintbrush, go down to title, and now I can change the name of it. Residential. And I'll say it's the call length average. Voila, title changed. Whew. So we still have 20 minutes to go. I definitely plan on using those minutes. I'd like us to repeat the cycle. Let's do it one more time. I'm going to do a save. Sorry, no time again for a break. So sorry if you need to go. If you need to go and take a small restroom break, do so and tell me when you're back. So I'll summarize what I've been doing. But since it's just 2 hours, I just go the full 2 hours. Might have been worse with the morning group with all the morning coffee. So let's pursue only 20 minutes to go. Full cycle. So I'm gonna do some more charts in this report. So I wanna bring data again. I'm gonna start with get data again. Take a look at it in Power Query, relationships, modeling, that's all mandatory before I can do a visual with a third source of data. So what I'll bring is how many women were admitted. Okay. So I click in the white, so I'm ready to start over. Section 4 starts with get data again. CSV, this is again an outcome tracker extract. And last one, available in session 2 data folder, is woman admitted for last fiscal year. I do open, I wait a second and I get a sample. I look at my sample, I like it, so always hit transform data. Transform data takes me to Power Query. So we're gonna do some basic stuff again, selecting only the columns we wanna keep, but I'm gonna show you some more amazing functionalities we have in here when I'm talking about transforming your data. So I'm gonna select first system name ID, because the first column is not relevant. So I've selected system name ID. Hold down the control key, because I want to keep also both admission and discharge date. And then I'm going to scroll to the right, use the bar at the bottom to scroll twice. Yep. So I can find type of client and cultural background. So I want to do a few matrix with those. Oh, no. I dropped my control key. If you drop your control key, then you drop your continuous selection. So system name ID, admission date, discharge date. I go twice to the right so I can hold control key, find type of client and cultural background. Those are the only columns I want to keep. So I can scroll back to validate. Proper columns are selected. I go to remove columns to remove others. Voila. So I'm happy. I have the 5 columns that I wanted to keep. Now, we did some column renaming. So let's do this again. System name ID, double click. I'd rather call this woman admitted because I can simply count on that column and I'm gonna get how many women admitted. And that's good. Other columns have a proper name, have a proper data type. That's the icon I see in the corner of each column. I would like to analyze how long do each woman stay. Okay, so I'd like to know what's the stay length in days. I have both dates, so I should be able to calculate it. So that's like the whole purpose of Power Query, is I have this extract from my database that doesn't have the column about how long is the stay in days, but I can create it. How do I do so? Well, at the top, my menu bar, all we've been using until now is the home bar, but I can see that I can click on add column. And by clicking add column, it opens up a ribbon of all new buttons. And the second one is I can add a custom column. So let's click here. And now we get a pop-up. And that pop-up window is just going to guide me to adding a custom column. Give it a name. Stay in days. In the first box, I give it a name. Formula. What do I want? Well, simple subtraction. So I'll double click here on discharge date. So all my available columns are listed. I double click and it adds discharge date to the formula. Now I'm going to add the minus sign. Ooh, I get warning in red and yellow token. If I stop here, my formula is incomplete. I know that. I'm going to double click admission date. Ooh, green check mark. No errors. This seems like a valid formula doing the difference between 2 days. So let's hit OK and see if we have an added column. We do. It looks maybe a little wacky for the moment, but it is. So the only issue with our column is that in the corner you see the type for that column. It is not set. I have ABC123. So this means Power BI is unsure what kind of data we have in here. Is it time? No, it's numbers. It's my number of days. So I'm going to click on ABC123 and I'm going to say those are a whole number. Ta-da! And I can validate myself. What about here? I see a number 10 and that person stayed from May 1st to May 11th. So yes, this is 10 days. So actually my calculation worked. So this is amazing stuff, just a tiny introduction of things you can do in Power Query. So am I done? Maybe I'm simply gonna change my name on the right-hand side. Left-hand side, I'm so sorry. I missed that part in kindergarten, differentiating right and left. Admissions. So I'm gonna get a smaller name. I hit enter and that's it. So I'm satisfied with the first step, going through Power Query and making some transformations. So now at the top on the home, click on home ribbon to find my close and apply button. So Power BI is just processing. Take a look if we have questions in the chat. Okay, so thank you for attending, and I understand if you rather watch this later on as a recording. Okay, what did we do? We just completed the first step going through Power Query. I need relationships. So I'll go to my relationship menu. Admission, women admissions is standing alone. It needs to be tied to everything else. I explained earlier that this is a hard concept to grasp, but tables cannot be tied together if I'm counting on them. So I'll be counting how many women admitted as I'm counting the calls. So women admitted needs to be tied to calendar, just like the other two were tied to calendar. Oh, admissions, I have two dates, the admission date or the discharge. So this is for my preference to pick. So I feel that since I'll be counting how many women were admitted, I want to look at that value per in which month were they admitted or in which order. So I'll use the admission date. So why don't I grab this one, the admission date, and I'll drop it on the calendar date. And to validate myself, I can hover the arrow in between my two tables and validate that they are attached both by a date field. So I'm happy. Before I do my chart, I'll take a look in data view. So on the left side, I go to data view. So when I arrive in data view, the first data that I see is the last one that I was looking at. So last time we were here, I was looking at turnaways. So that's what's being displayed. So go on the right-hand side, and at the bottom of your list, click on women admissions. By doing so, you now see your new table. Select each column and validate if you should do any modeling. Women admitted. Yes, this is a whole number, but summarization, same as we did previously with calls, I'll change this to count, or else it's going to tell me I'm admitting billions of women. So I do count. So that's for women admitting. My two dates, I needed those to calculate my stay in days and to do relationships, but I don't need them anymore. So I can hide them. So select both date columns one at a time to hide. And I'm gonna jump right away to stay in days because there's nothing to do with the other ones. Stay in days, my last column. So this is a number. So always for a number, Power BI is going to attempt to do sum. What I'll be interested in is what's the average stay for my people. So, and what we'll look at is depending on my client type, do they have a different average stay? So sum is going to be changed to average. So we've covered the mandatory steps and we are ready to do charts. So I'm going back to report view. And I want to do a chart. Let's try a bar chart. We haven't done any of those. Make sure you click in the white of your page so nothing is selected. And let's build another chart. So bar chart. What do I want on the axis? Well, I'm going to expand. I'm going to collapse my tables. Oof. So I'm going to expand only my women admissions. And I'm going to look at type of clients on the axis and stay in days and values. I'll add women admitted to the tooltip. So we haven't used tooltip too much yet. That's quite interesting. I'll collapse filters here. Voila. Okay, so what do I get as a result? I get this chart. So when I go over a bar, I see the average stay, so 21 days. And for that fiscal year, I had 54 women in that client type. So two information in the same bar chart. Having my women admitted information, I'll be able to use that to sort my bars. So currently bars are sorted in descending order of the length of stay, but I'd like them to be sorted in my most popular client type. Okay, so the 3 dots is allowing me to change sorting orders. So sort descending, that's good, but sort descending by how many women admitted. So what do I mainly have in my shelter are victim of abuse. So last year I got 145 admissions, and then I'm looking at their length of stay. So sexual assaults clients, I've only had 3. Okay, so I'd rather have that type of client listed at the bottom. So playing with sorting in your chart. So that quite covers it. I'm gonna show you how to, just for the fun of it, adding a 4th chart. So I click in the white, and because right now we brought it women admitted, and we did a chart only using data from that table. But again, I'll do another chart that does cherry picking from multiple tables on the right side. So I click in the white. And now I'll try a chart where we combine line and columns. So in Excel, this would be a combo chart. So I picked the chart icon that has columns and line. And very quickly, I can add the months on my axis. And now I'd like to look at women admitted versus turn away calls. So my columns are going to be, so column values are going to be women admitted. And then I'll go to turnaways and I'll put them on the line. So again, a chart where I pick information from different outcome tracker extract, and they can be all put in one chart because they're attached both to the calendar table with relationships. And it gives me this chart at the bottom, which gives me interesting information. I can see here, so just having some fun in interpreting data, I could see that I got loads of requests as the summer started. So I was full, and that's why I ended up having lots of turnaways in August. Then less people came in, and there in November, December, I had very little turnaways. So maybe the quantity of women admitted may explain a little the quantity of turnaways. So that being all covered, I'll answer questions from last week. So somebody asked about, can I name my charts? So that's probably referring to the functionality in Excel. In Excel, you can name your charts. Here in Power BI, your chart title is the chart name. So there's no extra field for a chart name. And somebody asked about color themes. So if you like, you can apply some nice formatting to the whole page. So in your menus at the top, if I go to view, I have here a menu about themes. So if I go out here, and I can browse for themes, there are other ones that I can download from the web, but there's already a few. So I can pick wacky stuff and really play with the colors of my charts by going on the view menu and selecting different themes. So hopefully you'll have time until Friday to play a little in Power BI and experiment with the second take home. Second take home is actually building out of today's report. So we're simply adding another extract and trying to build this chart displayed here. If you haven't completed the exercises today, the only thing you need to do prior to doing your take home, so this is the take home, how it's going to look when you're done with it, you need to minimally import the calendar and the women admissions. So you need to redo the steps to import calendar and women, attach them with relationships, doing the modeling of each column, and then you can start the take home, which is going to ask you to add also information about how many children admitted. So thanks a lot for attending. I'll stop my recording